Welcome to another podcast episode of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, the book by Michael Joseph Ferguson, a guidebook to transforming adult ADD and ADHD. Thank you for joining us once again. Always a pleasure to be with you. For those of us that are just joining us on this podcast, we have Michael, the author of the book, which you may have found on thedrummerandthegreatmountain.com, or perhaps you found us in iTunes under Adult ADD. This podcast is focused on bringing us together in the journey of the hunter type, as we call it, and discussions and viewpoints on the journey of being hunter type and dealing with adult ADD, ADHD, and all the branching paths that takes for those of us that are, in a way, blessed with this as our journey. So we welcome here into covering chapter 4 of the book. And for those of us that are new to the podcast, we're going to be covering the book here in the podcast episodes in the first handful. So for those of you that have the book, this podcast is kind of designed as a support system for the book, for you reading it and then checking in with us on this podcast to help you guide along. And obviously we can give you much more information, and the discussion points are really what brings things alive for you here. So we're going to dive right into chapter 4, which is the hunter type brain. As is mentioned in the opening, to gain a clearer understanding of what makes us tick as hunter types, we have to look at what's happening underneath the hood. So far, for those of you who have been into the book and into the podcast so far, we've kind of covered the hunter-farmer theory, and that's a great starting point for just understanding how we operate. But now we're going to really get into it. And so I will stop blabbering and bring in the author himself, Mr. Michael Joseph Ferguson. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good. How you doing?
Good, man. Beautiful, beautiful morning here in sunny Southern California. So, yeah, let's dive into this. Tell us in your experience and in your journey about what makes us tick in the way we do, how our clock works.
Yes. Well, one of the pieces that in embarking on writing this book, it was a process of discovery for me, because I had put together quite a few of these pieces beforehand, but in actually going through and revisiting the current brain studies and understanding just how the brain works and what makes what is ADD like in the biochemistry? What does it do? How does it function? What is it? Is it a disorder? Is it not? What is specifically it? What I started to unearth, and primarily it was from addiction research, because there's a lot of research available on addiction in the brain, marrying that with a lot of the knowledge that's available in studies on on ADD, ADHD, which a lot on kids. There were some pieces that came out that I found put the puzzle pieces together for me. It's like, okay, now I get it. Now here are all the pieces fit together, and it's nothing that I've read previously, and I feel like there's still a lack of making a connection between brain studies and medical research that sometimes is hard to wade through, and actually getting it down to, well, what do I do with my life, and how does this affect my ability to focus, and what's actually going on. So what we're going to cover today is just going through what's actually happening in your brain, specifically in your neurology, but it's specifically in your brain that creates the challenges. And again, as we've discussed in the past, what also are the benefits of being wired this way, and more specifically, then how does a routine that you've created for yourself affect the things that are happening in your brain? What's actually really going to work to give you stability, clarity, focus, and an ability to not be taken over by what are usually the ADD symptoms of, challenges with focus, motivation, addiction on the extreme ends of it. So what's going on there? And so that's what we're going to cover today.
Excellent. It's interesting. One of the things that triggered for me is the word you use, routine. I think the irony there is that's what's hunter types are not used to. I mean, that's the whole irony. It's the very thought of when you describe someone with hunter type and the syndromes of adult ADD, ADHD, and something you emphasize on the website, the drummerandgreatmountain.com, especially, and we've gotten into it a bit, and we're going to get into it deeper in future podcasts, is the artist type personalities that we've talked about so much, stand-up comedians, actors. You tend to find them in this category, and it's the whole idea of being an artist is kind of being, and I don't say this in a derogatory term, but flighty, being off the cuff and being a free spirit. People like that tend to not have routines. So tell us about how this is one of the first things that is about being a hunter type brain and creating the supportive routine.
So that's a good point. And I think if we dig below the surface, and we just did a coaching session before we record this podcast. I think the irony is that there's a perception of people with ADD, ADHD, and artists that we're kind of just what you just shared, which is perfect. Like that's the perception. But the reality is the focus and clarity and determination to do something, we are very capable of routine. It's just finding those routines that actually work for us. And I know for you and for myself in learning music and art and computers or whatever it is that you're focused on, there is a routine. I mean, we have systems in place that otherwise we wouldn't learn anything. So whoever you are, I mean, there's going to be routines and systems in place that at least partially work. So I think I want to, in starting going through into talking about the brain, is that we're fully capable of doing them. And if we have any challenges with routines, it's because they're not the right routine.
Right.
And
It's
there's
the
not
wrong
an
routine.
it's not going. So, and again, in further podcast we'll cover like how do you create a really stable routine that you can, I don't want to say easily, because life's challenging, and so sometimes there is a challenge maintaining a routine. So I don't want to say easily maintain, but sustainably maintain, because it's gifting you so many other things that you see the value, and it's contributing to you, and so therefore you can sustain it. So I'm cautious about calling any of this like a quick fix.
Right.
On the other end of it, though, changes and progress can be made very quickly. And today, again, we're going to talk about why the brain, understanding your brain and understanding like how you're wired specifically, will give you exponential insights into making really good routines that's going to support your brain chemistry, that's going to support your overall well-being, so that you may or may not have to go on to ADD meds. And then but more importantly, that you can sustain your level of creativity and do the things that you really want to do and accomplish in the world. And with a self-knowledge that doesn't, you don't get into those places where something hits you from behind and you're like, oh, okay, I'm down again. This thing keeps getting me over and over again. So that's what we're going to cover.
Excellent. So let's get into it. Let's dive right in. In your research, in your experience for yourself and in writing this book, help us understand ourselves and the hunter type brain, and talk to us about neurotransmitters and the two key things here, which are dopamine and serotonin, and what is happening in the hunter type. So we start with understanding ourselves, which is what we want to do in these first few chapters. So tell us about us as far as dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah. So, well, what it seems to boil down to, that what makes us, in kind of looking through, pouring over all the research, and there's many different types of ADD. There's long and short of it. I think we may have covered it last time. It usually we usually fall into three categories, which is ADD, which is sort of the challenge with attention and focus, and then ADHD, which is the hyperactivity piece, and then a combination of those two things. And then there's further, some of the medical research will go into further subcategories. However, overall, there's one piece that seems to be pretty clear, which is that ADD, ADHD is related to dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, and it has to do with having genetically lower levels of dopamine receptors in the brain. So it's actually not low dopamine; it's low dopamine receptors. So that's sort of the context. Underneath that, so just understanding. So neurotransmitters, to zoom out, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are the wiring in your brain. This is like the pathways by which thoughts, motor skill, everything that has to do with your perception of the world and how you function, how you tell your body to do different things, emotions, all are very intimately connected with neurotransmitters. And the two big ones, there are others, and I want to start on the outside by saying this is a slight oversimplification, but if we go really deep into some of the other ones like norepinephrine and a few of the other neurotransmitters, it gets a little muddy. So I'm oversimplifying, but
Sure.
it's going to give you enough information to work with. So the two big ones are dopamine and serotonin. And dopamine is the one that most affects people with adult ADD. And that has to do with there's three pieces that are most important. Dopamine affects learning, focus, and motivation. Those are the three things. And
Mm-hmm.
focus and motivation being the culprits when we are feeling so when we're feeling unfocused or unmotivated, which is something that's that sort of like blah, can't get myself up, can't extract myself
The
from like
fog. You refer
it's
to it as a
it,
fog a lot of
it's the
times.
brain fog. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the result of not having enough dopamine flowing through your brain at that
Mm-hmm.
moment and connecting those neurotransmitters. They're
Mm-hmm.
no, connecting these one part of your brain to another. And so dopamine's primarily, and there's other pieces to it, but learning, motivation, and focus. That's ADD 101. So we're going to cover a lot on dopamine. The other neurotransmitter, which everyone should know about and understand, is serotonin. And serotonin affects your overall well-being. And when people are depressed and they go through those dark clouds of depression, that is serotonin primarily. And when you and antidepressants focus on serotonin. And so understanding serotonin is extremely important, because this is it, it's an epidemic. Depression is an epidemic, and even if you're not a hunter type, understanding what you need to do to keep your serotonin levels up so you don't have to take antidepressants, which have exponential side effects that I've
Mm-hmm.
watched it firsthand really harm people.
Same here.
There's ways of addressing that neurotransmitter through diet and exercise for both of these that is extremely important. Everyone should understand them. So those are the neurotransmitters, and I want to just give some shout outs to the sources of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the material that I referenced in writing the book. Two of them being Julia Ross wrote a book called The Mood Cure. Highly, highly, highly recommended reading. Go out and buy it. Have it in your library at home. It is essential reading. I give her credit throughout the book. Specifically, this chapter and the addiction chapter were highly referenced from her work, and also the diet chapter, because she speaks a lot about how nutrition affects brain chemistry. And I simplified it and to put it into very specific form just for the ADD piece in the book. Try to take out the best pieces, the most important pieces. She is outstanding. Does a lot of she has 20, 30 years plus experience in using diet and nutrition and supplements in treating people with intense addiction challenges. And then the other person is Dr. Kevin McCauley, who is he runs a clinic, and I think it's in Arizona. Um, on It's an addiction, it's a rehab clinic, and his there's actually a few videos of his online that really changed my perception of how the brain works, what happens in our brains, and he was referencing alcoholism and addiction and what's going on there, but so many of the same threads run through topics of ADD, and he's really good at simplifying what's going on in the brain, how does the brain work, what is dopamine, what is the role of dopamine play, why are some people more sensitive than others to being caught in addiction, which is sort of the extreme end of ADD. So those are two really important references I wanted to share on the outset in going into this discussion on neurotransmitters, the brain, and just how we function.
Yeah, thank you for that. So in setting up the next part of what we want to talk about, which is kind of like, in a way, I guess we're presenting the problem, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Just we want to present so we understand how we tick, but we also want to get to the solution, which is the diet, the exercise, which Michael's going to talk to us today about, as he does in the book, about diet, and because the whole idea here is to understand the diet that is not good for us, the bad routine, and we want to talk about the good routine, getting yourself to that good routine as far as diet is considered. But before we go there,
Mm-hmm.
Michael, talk to us about creative thought as dopamine stimuli. This is when I started hitting the book. This is the part that really struck a chord
Mm-hmm.
with me as a musician. And yes, I said
Yeah.
that on purpose. It really did, because talk to us about, because the website refers to it in parts of your book. Talk to us
Yeah.
about the dopamine and this creative, inventive stuff that happens because we start out, as you said, with the low dopamine. Talk to us about this cycle
Yeah.
that happens in the bad routine, and then we'll get into the diet stuff as the solution.
Good. Okay. So I'd say that on the outset, to cover that, what tends to, like, when, as you're listening to this, as someone who actually is wired this way with ADD, ADHD, hunter type in quotes, that's the term I like to use. Um, there is inherent in who we are a sense of restlessness, and that may be a physical restlessness, like, oh, okay, that's sort of the hyperactivity, or it's that sort of restlessness, like, there's something I need to do, there's an underlying feeling of restlessness. That's a really important piece, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the result of lower dopamine receptors. It's like we're yearning for that completion because we don't have the level of normalized dopamine that other people have. And so that state of kind of like, oh, restlessness, that leads us towards things that stimulate dopamine. And what can stimulate a dopamine release is creative thoughts, ideas, like, oh, like those fire little dopamine releases in the brain, and it kind of creates this cascade of like, oh yeah, and it starts to satisfy that feeling of restlessness. And I know, I'm sure you know this, that we go into these spaces, I know I do, where I'm like, oh, I'm just in that world of
Sure,
creativity, and it's so satisfying. It's like,
sure.
oh, and when I don't have it, I feel off and just don't feel good. So that is the positive effect of having a wiring this way, is that we have this feeling of restlessness creates creativity is creative thought is the satisfying expression of it's connecting that dot. It's
Which
that.
is the good, which is the good solution to that. So it's interesting, the picture you're painting here is, it's really interesting. We've got a chemical thing in the body, and this to use a cliche, this is just what's so fascinating about how we're made overall. Our bodies, this thing, this computer that we call the brain. Those with low dopamine levels, the your body literally is talking to you. How does it talk to you? It inflames a spot that has an infection, but when it comes to this, it's telling you, I am low on dopamine. How is it doing that? At least this is how I picture it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Certainly, is the way it's communicating to you is this feeling, this thing you can't touch, a feeling of restlessness, because it's saying, go raise my dopamine. I need you to go raise this. And that's what causes this restless feeling. Therefore, why, in a good way, you go for that creative stimuli.
Yeah, it is sort of it's the stimulation. This is where it gets a really like subtle and kind of tricky, because it's not necessarily the dopamine. It's that release that connect. It's like there's pieces in your brain that aren't connected, and there's a yearning to make those synapses connect, and it's
Right.
that yearning
Huh.
that, in say, an entrepreneur, leads them to do it, like finding things that are stimulating, that are connecting the dots, that are they're going to innovate something new. It's like that expression of this restlessness It's the thing that satisfies it. The
Mm-hmm.
other end of this, and we'll cover this in the next podcast, is addiction, because
Yep.
there's so many behaviors
Yep.
and substances that can do the same thing, that stimulate dopamine, that you don't get any benefit from it.
Well,
If you get the feeling of satisfaction in the moment, but you don't get any kind of long-term benefit from it. And in fact, if anything, that is very self-destructive. And we're going to cover why that, and getting caught in stimuli that are just sitting mindlessly and playing a video game for hours and hours and hours and hours, and knowing that this is not good.
right. Right.
But not being able to extract yourself. This is the other side of having this state of having less dopamine
Well, you
receptors.
could almost hear it in the way I was telling you what I was picturing. You could almost hear the cycle, right? And that's what I was trying to describe. Isn't it fun?
Mm,
Like, oh, our body's telling this, so go after it. Well, what happens the next time I'm down? Go after it. I mean,
yeah,
you could literally hear in between the lines. And like you said, we're going to cover it in the future, but I think it's
yeah,
important uh, for the listeners to see this. Again, we're right now focusing on how we work, and this is how we work. So, again, understanding this, I think, was what was huge for me, because I think for right, if you go through your first 20, 30, whatever, X number of years operating like this, but you're just find yourself going after the stimuli, being in whatever cycle you are to seek this stimuli, yet you feel like something is off, but you don't know why. But then when you actually see it, you're like, oh, that's what was happening to me. I was
yeah,
looking for this because this was happening. So
yeah.
I think that's really, really big. And as Michael said, we definitely want to get into um, the addiction thing, which you've heard us probably say it at least 10 times now over the last
Yes.
podcast, which is this is why the artist personality
Yes.
tends to be this way, and why a lot of creative people fall into the addiction cycle. So we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah.
So I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we've covered, I mean, we could do this for hours, but in the sense for a podcast, I think we've kind of covered how we tick. Is there anything else you want to cover before we get into the diet and how critical this is for the solution, and also understanding what the bad diet routine is? Anything else you want to cover on the neurotransmitters part?
No, and in fact, if anything, I think we can segue into the diet
Go
piece
ahead.
by saying that the other addiction that can get, the other way to get that dopamine hit in a not healthy way is sugars,
Mm-hmm.
refined sugars. It's food addiction is
Mm-hmm.
the label. So refined sugars, um, white flour, everything that's in anything with artificial ingredients, and all the high fructose corn syrup, cokes, like sodas, all those things are also, and we are embedded. Most of us are embedded in this diet. Is that diet is in a sense your brain addicted to something, and it's addicted to sugar, and you don't know. Like the thing I've noticed, I lived on Kauai for a while, and I would hike back to this very remote part of Kauai called the Nepali coast, and you get a pass to go back there, and you can stay for like 10 or 12 days. What you notice right away is after 2 or 3 days, if people don't have sugary foods, they start to go crazy. Like there's like ample amounts of like mangoes growing. There's all this amazing food there that you could just eat from the valley.
Sure.
And as soon as people run out of their comfort foods, they freak out. And
Well,
and we would
yeah.
talk about that. And so I think that's the thing is, most people would, even some people would say, I don't know, if you are eating a standard American diet and you're ingesting refined sugars and you're ingesting colas and all that, you are addicted to refined sugar, period. And it's not bad or good, but you have to, well, it is, I would say it's definitely on the bad end of the spectrum, because what those foods, what especially refined sugars do in white flour, is they can decrease your brain like healthy brain chemicals, and this is where Julia Ross calls them the bad mood foods.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going into discussing neurotransmitters and diet. It's really important to know that if you're eating not the best diet, you're actually taking down your serotonin levels, taking down your dopamine levels. You're fighting against yourself. And so this is where it becomes much easier to take a pill than actually address what's actually creating the situation of extreme ADD symptoms and also depression.
Well, that's the trap, right? This, and I've heard you talk about this in your lectures as well. I mean, that's the trap, is that if you take the pill and then
Yeah,
don't fix the diet, the pill is only going to take you so far. And
yeah,
then the solution, the bad cycle right now in the West is what? More medicine.
yeah,
And to me, the responsibility on any good caretaker is, and this is what you're trying to encourage with a system like the Drummer in the Great Mountain and this book and the lectures and what we're trying to do with this podcast is say, if you don't address it's the very bad fuel, as you said, Julia
yeah,
Ross calls it bad mood foods, this
yeah,
bad fuel that you're giving your body, the medicine is only going to take you so far. The
yeah,
power is in changing the source of what you're putting in your body first
exactly, exactly.
and going that. So these bad mood foods, refined sugars, white flours, is it too much of a summary to say, in essence, this is what in a bad way gives the hunter type their high? Does it actually, do these bad foods give you that stimuli that, even if it's short term, is it masking that, hey, I got my high, I'm good? And is that why we fall into this addictive cycle with these bad mood foods?
Yeah. So, well, I think this is the point of, and also I want to be transparent here. I had to shift my diet in my early 20s. I realized I had to do it. There was a medical situation that happened where I was having heart palpitations,
Hmm.
and I looked it up and I found it was the caffeine. It was drinking tons of sodas. I had to go through the process of changing my diet because I thought I was going to die. It
Wow.
was clear. It was a little outside of what was. In hindsight, I'm like, course, I wasn't going to die. It was just the caffeine,
Sure.
but I needed to feel that to
Mm-hmm.
make the changes. And this had nothing to do with ADD. I didn't even know it was on the map at that point.
Hmm.
But as soon as I started removing those refined sugars, the artificial ingredients out of my diet, the change in my life was extreme. I went from just being in a perpetual fog to starting my own company and being very successful in my creative endeavors. Very 6 months. It was a 6 month turnaround to the point where I lost like 35, 40 pounds. People were like, oh, it was dramatic change
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And it wasn't, I won't say it was easy, but it was I was so driven by the things that I wanted to do in the world, and I saw that the only way I would get there is through health and nutrition. So I want to just be transparent
Sure.
because if you haven't read the book yet, I empathize with. I'm not flippant about, oh, you should just change your diet. I'm aware that that's a challenging piece, but it's a piece that needs to happen. We've been brought up in a culture that has, especially since the 1950s, when we've introduced these heavily refined foods, artificial ingredients into the diet of the American, to American and global. So there's people I know listening from outside the United States
Mm-hmm.
that we just take it as normal. But the fact is, these foods, especially for people with ADD, are poisoning you. They're
Literally, yeah.
creating, they're literally creating, they're robbing you of certain brain chemicals you need to feel okay. And if you didn't ingest these foods and you replace them with really satisfying, healthier alternatives, in which we'll talk about in future podcasts, the change can be dramatic. And at this point, just about anywhere in the country and anywhere in the world, you can find replacements for it. And if you have to get online, you can get online and order some snack foods or things that are a little healthier for you that can replace, give you the sense of comfort food and not take you down. This is what we'll talk about. So I think we need to go into specifically in starting here is, so that and we'll mention this over and over again. The three, well, I'll say three most important essentials
Mm-hmm.
in treating ADD, and then we'll tag it into the neurotransmitters pieces. High protein, low carb diet, which has with healthy protein sources. So avoiding red meat, having organic sources for your protein if possible. Vegetarian protein is very much a good option if you know how to get complete proteins. But chicken, fish, Um, fish being probably the top of the list if you can get it. About 3 times a week. Salmon, wild caught salmon, very good for all the brain, for the oils that we need for the essential fatty acids, and everything that we need to make our brains work really well. Cardio at least 3 times a week, half an hour to 45 minutes per session, and then replacing the refined sugars and artificial ingredients, including flavorings, preservatives, with healthy alternatives. Those are the 3 pieces that if you do those 3 pieces, your life, if you've been eating the standard American diet, you will I can almost guarantee you, your life will make a positive and pretty dramatic move towards the positive, because you're now feeding your body what it actually needs to feel healthy. I think one of the overarching points to this condition of having lower dopamine receptors in the brain is that we're far more susceptible. People who are hunter types are far more susceptible to diet than everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so you can look over at your spouse or people around you, and they're eating certain foods and they seem to be fine, and you can have the same foods and it totally wigs you out. Or you might not even know it's wigging out because it's so normal to you that it's just part of your day-to-day routine. But I am telling you, from all the clients that I've worked with across the board, people with ADD are far more, and in studies, especially studies on colorings and preservatives, we are far more susceptible to a bad diet than the rest of the population. And if you're not eating well, you will undoubtedly have ADD symptoms. It's what's going to happen, because you're not giving your brain what it needs to create these positive brain chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, the things that are actually going to give you a sense of well-being, focus, motivation, the things you need to function and do well in the world.
And I think the thing to keep in mind here is that I want to go back one point on what you shared about your experience with foods. I was the hunter type. I never had a problem with sugar. I think maybe in my life, I have had honestly 10 cans of any soda you mentioned. I maybe had 10 cans in total. Sugar was never an issue for me. Go to a birthday party, people would have to beg me to eat a piece of cake. I never enjoyed that. But I'll tell you what this hunter type's issue is the carbohydrates. And it all comes together now because, and I should specify, being of the Persian culture, we live off of rice and bread. I mean, rice and bread is our thing. Everything we have in our menu, in the culture, is related to rice and bread. We start out with a little bread and cheese before the rice comes. Then you have the rice with the stew, and we have our desserts too. Don't get me wrong, but then I had the smarts to go and marry an Italian woman. Well, here comes the pasta, and it was over. It was over. I had been living in an absolute fog, and until I saw the light, and I'm not trying to at all emphasize anything about, and you don't either in the book or in this system. I think the extreme things are always dangerous. Atkins came out, and a lot of people went on. We're not talking about that, but I am just, I want to share that once I went with what you mentioned as the essential. So Michael has mentioned the bad things, the refined sugars as a summary, white flour and the artificials. You start cutting those out. You have to replace. And the whole idea that Michael is trying to say here is replace them with the good stuff. Now, that process is not easy. I am a witness to that. You are going to go through the same withdrawal symptoms that an alcoholic does, that a drug addict does. Get ready for it. If you're in the beginning of the journey, I just personally want to share my story and say it's not an easy thing, but just hang in there. I can't promise you how long. I'll tell you, for me, it was literally within 10 to 14 days. Seems like a long time, but it's really not. Within that 10 to 14 day period, this fog that we keep referring to, the hunter type fog, will start to go away. And it is like putting on a new pair of eyes, just in how you see the world, how you feel about the world, and go into this high protein, low carb thing. Again, not the extremes, not the Atkins stuff of the world is key. So talk to us now about, let's move on. Talk to us about the high protein, low carb. Give us a summary of high protein, low carb and the cardio and what that does. Now talk to us about how this starts
Yes.
positively reinforcing the body so that we can then get on to also wrapping up with how we train the brain and creativity and stimulating thoughts.
Perfect. Exactly. Okay. So here's why. Here's why you specifically high protein, low carb, and cardio. How does this affect dopamine levels and serotonin as well? So because we require more dopamine to make the same connections, to feel like somewhat normalized in that to say what you just said of the getting rid of the fog. What you have to understand is that to create dopamine, your body needs protein. And so to go back to our high school health and nutrition or chemistry class, protein, when your body looks at a protein like chicken or fish or hummus, it doesn't see protein. What it sees is amino acids. There's all these amino acids that our body then takes in and utilizes to do all sorts of things in our body. We need protein. It's so important. You can't live without protein. So specifically, for dopamine, the precursor to dopamine is L-tyrosine. That is the amino acid that's in just about every protein source, and some protein sources have it more than others. When you have L-tyrosine, the body goes, oh, okay, L-tyrosine, I can now make dopamine. So when you focus on a higher protein diet and it's healthy sources of protein, especially I like fish, and the chickens and the poultry are all very good sources of protein to nurture your brain. Then your body has more dopamine available. So that means that you're no longer in that fuzzy fog state. You've got an ability to focus and be clear. And yet it doesn't give you the same effect that some people who take the ADD meds say, well, this is great, I can get stuff done, but I don't feel like myself anymore. You get the benefit of feeling like yourself, being creative, but you're not in that fog. So high protein, low carbs, especially white flours, sugary pastries, those all convert very quickly in the body to sugar. Alcohol also, just think of alcohol as just being a big dose of sugar. And so what happens is, not only do those foods not create any dopamine, they can deplete your stores of serotonin and dopamine. So it's so important. I just can't stress it enough. You can there's ways of doing this, and we'll discuss it in future podcasts, that it doesn't have to be really, 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 really hard. It can be you can start replacing these foods with foods that have whole sugars in them, including snacks, and that you can replace. You can get your cookies and all the things that in snack bars, and you don't have to just completely take on some ungodly diet that you're never going to be able to maintain.
Something you can't maintain anyways, which will put you right back in. Yeah.
That's it. The bounce. You just go into it. You like, oh, I'm going to do this. The hunter type thing of like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then you crash, and then you feel worse, and then it's so much harder for you to do it the next time. So the book and what we'll talk about is how do you make that change in a way where it's not dramatic. It's sustainable. You can keep it. You can keep to it. I've kept to this for 21 years now, and I have zero cravings for unhealthy foods. I don't have it. So I can tell you undeniably it's doable. I was brought up with the standard American diet to the extreme. I had fast food all the time. So I can speak from personal experience. You can do it. You can maintain it. Guaranteed.
That's a great point. I do want to emphasize right on top of what you said, the irony that we can all laugh about. The very idea of being a hunter type is that I loved what a really good friend of mine, and turned out to be a spiritual teacher in my life, said to me, is that the hunter type that we are, it's very in our nature, like you said, the entrepreneur, to do what he called sprinting. We are just, our type is made to sprint. So we are really good at it. Ask us to run a short race, run it fast, win first place, we will do it. And I'm talking about obviously philosophically. The
Yes.
whole idea here is to learn to be a long distance runner. And you can do that as a hunter type. And once a hunter type learns to be a long distance runner when it comes to diet and exercise, as you just said, proof in the pudding, 21 years, that is a long distance runner. You do that, and then the pros of being a hunter type really come into play, and now you're just a very powerful person who can really do some good for yourself and others in the world.
That's it. That's it. And you can pursue those things that you can refine your creativity and start your own business. Do if you haven't already. So many hunter types are entrepreneurs or people that and I'm sure that are listening to this. So that's the high protein, low carb. To go into cardio, the other piece. So cardio is the other piece of the equation. So not just exercise. Cardio means physical, get your heart moving, air in your lungs. So, and again, this is where the hunter farmer theory comes in. If you think of yourself as a hunter, it's the sprinting, you're exercising hard for half hour to 45 minutes, 3 times a week. Cardio is, so what cardio does is it normalizes these dopamine receptors, and it seems to do something, and I haven't found in the research specifically what it is, but it has a different effect than anything else. So, and I've tracked myself and I've tracked clients where they start doing cardio and it seems to normalize dopamine at a level that nothing else does. So specifically what I've noticed is, if I do cardio 3 times a week, I will notice, even if I did it once a week, the positive effect of being able to do mundane tasks and accomplish those things are the hardest things for us to do. My ability to do those not only the day after I ran, but 2 days after was noticeable. So there is this piece with cardio that it gives you the gift of being more of a farmer type, being able to handle those things that you don't usually handle. So if you look at your life right now and you say, okay, I'm in this fog. What's going on? I can't focus. The 2 questions to ask yourself are, what are you eating? Are you eating enough protein? What are you putting in your body that may be harming your brain chemistry? And 2, when was the last time I exercised and did cardio? And I want to say, we'll cover it again later, but cardio, I encourage people to get outdoors if you can. Find something that you love doing versus something you have to do.
Well said.
Which will make it sustainable.
Yes.
You'll do it for me. I go down the beach because I live close to a beach. I run barefoot for at least a half hour, 40 minutes. I love it. It's so fun. It's just, I get all sorts of ideas. I usually journal after, and it gives me insights on the week. For whatever it is for you, I encourage people, if you can, to get out in nature. If there's something about being in nature, especially if you're growing up in a city, even if it's to a park or, jogging around a lake somewhere where you're at, whatever it is, a hike, find something that if you can, get you outdoors, get you fresh air, get you away from all the buzz of whatever's going on in your life, and half hour to 45 minutes, make it something that you enjoy doing. That will be sustainable. And what it's also going to give you exponential benefits in terms of your ability to feel really good. So there's a difference between just normalizing and feeling really unstoppable. And I know for me, that shift happened pretty quickly where I was like, wow, I just look back and look at all the things that I accomplished in such a short period of time. And it wasn't even until later, actually, even as I was starting to work on the book, that I went, oh, that's exactly what was going on. My dopamine was low. I was just really in a low state. Felt like I had a battery that was really low and drained. And within a few months of just focusing on these particular things, everything changed. And I've seen it over and over and over again. So if there's no question at this point, like if you have ADD and you've been diagnosed with ADD and you are not eating a healthy, high protein, low carb diet,
you're doing
and
yourself
you are not doing cardio.
You're just doing
this
yourself
is
a
it. There's your map.
disservice.
This is the map that you're looking for. Like this will do it. This
Yep.
will do it. If you just focus on this and stay with it and find sustainable ways to maintain this routine, it'll change your life. So I just want to put an explanation point behind all of that.
Um, the share point I have on that, I is on. So there's ways to approach things as you're trying to do a massive change to your life. So we mentioned the one thing is learning to be that long distance runner because as hunter types we tend to sprint. So when it comes to diet and exercise, I said find a way to be that long distance runner, and Michael just nailed it. So if you're out there and you're in this position, you're like, well, let me tell you my quick story. I have every injury you can mention, man. You would have thought I was a professional athlete. I'm not. I'm far from it. However, in the non professional things I've done in my life, I have slightly sprained C1 through C4 in my spine. I have terrible posture. I have broken or fractured both my ankles at least 6 times each in basketball and volleyball when I was younger. The price you pay when you're young and you don't notice what's going to happen until you get into your 40s and you pay the price
Yes.
then. I was left with, there was nothing I could do. It wasn't like I didn't try. There was nothing left for me to do is when it came to physical activity that didn't hurt, that didn't cause inflammation, that didn't cause pain. Now I look back, those were all excuses. I just didn't find the right thing. And this is why Michael emphasized, and I just wanted to hop on top of that. It's so critical to find. Stop thinking that doing cardio and doing exercise is something that you have to dread. It's really not. And I know people have said that, and you have heard that 1,000 times, like I have. But it's true. I'm a witness to it. Michael is for Michael. It's jogging on the beach. You couldn't pay me enough right now to go jog on a beach. My ankles can't take it,
Yeah.
and my back can't take it. I
Right.
found swimming. I found the thing for me. I remembered how much I loved swimming as a kid. And now that it's a form of exercise in a lap pool that I can measure also what I've done so that
Yeah.
I can have goals and attain and make them better, my life has changed because I've found the thing. And to the point of what Michael said, and this is stuff we'll get into about what we go through as hunter types, not only like the work life thing, but a lot of things that Michael talks about in his coaching and in his lectures are relationships, relationships, relationships. And let me be
Yes.
a witness to I can only speak because I am male, to the men out there. Watch the difference whether you're living with someone or in a serious relationship or married. Watch the difference your that exercising will make in your life, in your marriage. Just be a witness to it and observe. Because let me tell you, as a hunter type, some of the effects of being hunter type are not just the focus thing, it's moods. I mean, Michael
Yeah.
today has just
Yes.
talked about bad
Yes.
mood foods. Watch how your mood changes with your spouse and how you'll look back on those days when you didn't exercise and realize that being that hunter type and needing that stimuli and that restlessness, watch how when that restlessness goes away, guaranteed marriage approval that you don't need to go pay someone $200 an hour to therapize you. So I those things triggered so hard for me. So I just wanted to share that it's
Yeah.
huge. And on days that I don't, weeks that I don't get a chance to go, maybe 2 days. And if my wife and I literally now have a rule. We notice if for some reason scheduling happens, life happens. If I don't swim and it's 2 days, I have not swam my cardio exercise through swimming. By that third day, she goes, I'll take care of the baby. Go, get out. I need you to go because something happens that 48 hours without that activity. That little
Yeah.
things start to come back and the bad moods start to come back. And that fog will come back real quick. But then literally I'll go and swim for an hour and come back. I'm a new person. So I just had
That's
to
it.
emphasize those points that, for Michael, it's running. For me, it's swimming. Find the thing that you love, and it'll make a huge difference.
Exactly. That's it. And
Let
I want to make
Yeah, go ahead.
one quick point is
Sure.
from what you said, and I think it just to add on to what you shared about the sprinting and the long distance running. I think it's a lot of it's about short, like many short sprints.
Mm-hmm.
Because sprinting is part of who we are.
Sure.
We can't change that, but it's many short sprints that
Yes.
create that long distance feeling. Like that's the thing is we can't necessarily be farmer types who are a little more even. So we should remember that. But at the same time, it's those short sprints through your day, through your week, through your month that create this long. That's the long distance runner. That's
Excellent.
how you get to it. Is like finding those smaller routines throughout your day that, when combined together, create a routine that's very sustainable and very sad. It's like you feel like, oh, end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, you're very satisfied with, like, I
Well, you
did
feel like
what I did.
yourself. You
Yeah,
and
that's it.
before, when the fog was there, this is how I described the. And that's why I loved from day one when you described it as the fog. When
Yeah,
the fog is there, you're not in touch with yourself because there's a fog, there's a barrier.
yeah,
And when that fog is lifted, you're like, this is literally, oh, this is who I am. And you feel
that's right.
very comfortable. Before we wrap up today,
Yes,
I do want to reemphasize drummerandthegreatmountain.com. We hope you tune into the podcast often. We hope you do everything, but I also want to emphasize that website is awesome. There's a newsletter to sign up for, which you'll get little tips and hints on a regular basis. There's a blog on there. You'll also get to check out what events are coming up where Michael's speaking. There's lectures. You
yes,
can go check out things in person and interact with Michael in person. So check out all of it. We're trying to build a system for all of us here. So definitely tune into all the ways through the website, through subscribing to this podcast on iTunes. Check it all out. I also want to emphasize that the next podcast coming up will be covering the next chapter because we've hinted to it. We're finally going to get into the next podcast. We're going to cover addiction because this is a huge,
yeah,
and there's many branches of it. So stay tuned for the next one, which will cover how hunter types get into many different types of bad addiction. And
yeah,
if you're in that boat, we want to focus a whole podcast and dedicate in how to kind of get out of that hole, that bad cycle.
yes.
Michael, I turn to you. Any closing thoughts on chapter 4 and the hunter type brain? Anything you want to get out there before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered it, and I just, as a little teaser going into future podcasts, we'll be discussing in detail about the specifics of how do you create a sustainable routine, and what will be one of the great tools, I think, in the beginning, which is how do you create it? How do you track? There's a tracking system that I recommend with my clients that you can see after 30 days of just tracking once a day your mood and focus. Like, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, and you have a really clear map after 30 days what you need to do so that you can create a sustainable routine for you, because everyone's different, like you said. So stay tuned for that, and I think we covered it.
Excellent. I do want to emphasize to keep in touch with us. Let us know what you want to hear on this podcast. Let us know what you're interested in. If there's something you want more detail on, we're open. We're here to provide this.
Yes.
This is a service. This is something
Yeah.
Michael and I do on Saturdays because we're all part of the same community here. So
Yes.
drummerandthegreatmountain.com, there's a contact form on there. Reach out to us, reach out to Michael. Let us know how else we can help via this podcast because I think this is a great avenue. And I think, Michael, it's not too early also to tell folks out there, write to us if you want to be on with us on the podcast to share stories of what this
Yes.
journey has been like for you, what you've done. We want to hear, we want to connect with you. Tell us about your wins, which is something that Michael works through with his coaching sessions. I want to hear about your wins. I want to hear about this amazing book that we've all been blessed enough for Michael to put out there. And there's a lot of interest in it, and me being one of them and going through this journey with you. Let us know, and we want to interact with you and know what's happening in your hunter type world.
Fantastic.
Michael, thank you once again for joining us. Very informative. Really, as always, I learned so much, even though I've been through this and going through this. Every time these podcasts are, I learn even more. So I appreciate the detail and the thought that goes into the things that you say.
Thank you, my friend. Excellent job. So great to connect with you. And so I always appreciate your insights. Just outstanding. Thank you.
Take care, man. Go and enjoy this weekend and get out some good runs. It looks beautiful.
All right.
Till the next time, thedrummerandgreatmountain.com. Subscribe to this podcast if you're not already. We will definitely be keeping up with it. The Drummer and the Great Mountain is available through the website. We encourage you to share it with your friends, family. If you are listening and tuning into this podcast, not necessarily because you feel like you're a hunter type, but maybe wondering if someone in your life is and this would help them, let us know and reach out to them via the podcast and the book, and whatever you feel would be helpful on this in the guidebook to and the guide and the path in transforming. And I just want to finish off with, again, we are here to help you transform. Remember, we are not proposing a cure. We are not doctors. We are simply people who have gone through this, and we want to be on the journey with you in transforming adult ADD and ADHD. Until the next time, be well and take care of yourselves.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is intended solely for the purpose of personal growth and not as a replacement for professional psychological support. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests of this show are not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is very important to seek the help of a qualified medical practitioner when making any shifts to psychiatric medication you may be taking, or if you are experiencing extreme psychological distress.